What if a single moment of apparent cruelty could transform into the most beautiful act of kindness you've ever witnessed? Imagine this: a billionaire walks into a quiet diner, orders nothing but black coffee, sits for an hour, and when he leaves, he tips exactly $0. Not a penny. But under the plate, he leaves something that will change a waitress's life forever. Keep watching, because by the end of this story, you'll never look at an empty tip the same way again. Elena Martinez wiped down the last table of her evening shift at Murphy's Diner, her tired hands moving in practice circles across the worn formica surface. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their harsh glow on empty coffee cups and crumb-scattered plates. She'd been serving tables for 15 years, ever since her husband passed. And at 38, she thought she'd seen every type of customer walk through those glass doors. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened that rainy Thursday night, when a well-dressed stranger in an expensive suit sat alone in booth 7, ordered black coffee, and left without saying a word. When Elena cleared his table, she found no tip. Not even a penny. Just an empty plate, and what looked like a forgotten business card tucked underneath. Little did she know, this moment would change everything. Elena had always prided herself on treating every customer with the same warm smile, regardless of how they dressed or what they ordered. Murphy's Diner wasn't fancy. Red vinyl booths with duct tape patches, a coffee machine that sputtered like an old car, and a menu that hadn't changed since 1987. But it was honest work, and Elena needed every dollar she earned to keep her small apartment and send her teenage daughter Maya to community college. The regulars knew her story. How she'd worked double shifts when Maya was little. How she'd saved every tip to buy school supplies. How she'd never missed a parent-teacher conference, despite her exhausting schedule. That evening started like any other. The dinner rush had been busy with truckers stopping for pie and coffee, families celebrating Little League victories, and elderly couples sharing quiet conversations over meatloaf specials. Elena moved between tables with practiced grace, refilling coffee cups and remembering how customers liked their eggs. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, but she kept smiling, because that's what you do. You treat people with dignity, even when your own is tested. When the stranger entered around 9:30, something felt different. He was younger than most of Elena's customers, maybe 42, with perfectly styled hair and a suit that probably cost more than Elena made in 3 months. He walked with the confident stride of someone used to being important, but his eyes held something Elena couldn't quite place, a heaviness that expensive clothes couldn't hide. He chose the corner booth, the one usually reserved for teenagers trying to make a single order of fries last 2 hours. "Just coffee. Black," he said without looking up from his phone. His voice was polite, but distant, like he was speaking to someone he'd never see again. Elena poured his coffee and offered a slice of her famous apple pie, fresh from the oven, still warm. He declined with a shake of his head and returned to his phone, fingers typing rapidly across the glowing screen. For the next hour, he sat in silence, occasionally glancing toward the kitchen where Elena moved efficiently between orders. She refilled his cup twice without being asked, and each time she noticed he watched her work with an intensity that made her wonder what he was thinking. When he finally stood to leave, Elena felt a strange sense of unfinished business, like a conversation that had never quite begun. Elena approached booth 7 with her usual efficiency, stacking the coffee cup and wiping down the table with quick, practiced movements. That's when she noticed it, or rather, didn't notice it. No tip. Not even loose change forgotten in a pocket. Just an empty plate and a business card that seemed deliberately placed underneath, its crisp white edge barely visible beneath the ceramic rim. For 15 years of waitressing, Elena had learned that tips came in all forms. Sometimes generous $20 bills from grateful truckers. Sometimes just spare quarters from struggling families. And occasionally, nothing at all from customers who'd genuinely forgotten or were facing their own hardships. She'd never taken it personally, because everyone has their struggles. But something about this felt different. The man's expensive watch. His perfectly tailored suit. The way he'd spent an hour in her restaurant without ordering food. It all suggested someone who could certainly afford to acknowledge her service. Elena picked up the business card, expecting a local company logo or something the previous customer had dropped. Instead, she found herself staring at elegant gold lettering that read, Harrison Enterprises. And a name that made her heart skip. James Harrison, Chief Executive Officer. The name was familiar, though Elena couldn't immediately place where she'd heard it. Harrison Enterprises. Wasn't that the company building the new medical center downtown? The one that had been in the newspapers for bringing hundreds of jobs to their struggling town? Elena's hands trembled slightly as she held the card, wondering why a billionaire would sit in her humble diner for an hour, order nothing but coffee, and leave without even acknowledging her existence. It wasn't about the money, though every dollar mattered when you were working toward your daughter's dream of becoming a nurse. It was about being seen. About having your dignity acknowledged. Elena had served everyone from homeless veterans to visiting politicians with the same respect. And she'd always believed that kindness was a language everyone could speak, no matter their circumstances. As she walked toward the register to clock out, Elena felt a familiar ache in her chest. The same feeling she'd had when other customers treated her like she was invisible, like her service meant nothing. But she'd learned long ago that carrying anger only hurts yourself. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new chances to make someone's day a little brighter. She tucked the business card into her apron pocket, planning to throw it away with the evening's receipts, unaware that this simple piece of paper would soon reveal a truth more beautiful than she could ever imagine. The next morning brought devastating news that shattered Elena's carefully constructed world. Maya's college advisor called to say the scholarship funding had been cut due to budget problems. Without that money, Maya's dream of becoming a nurse would have to wait, maybe forever. Elena sat in their tiny kitchen staring at the stack of bills that seemed to grow overnight. Rent. Utilities. Maya's textbooks. And now the crushing reality that her daughter's future hung in the balance. "Mom, it's okay," Maya said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I can work full-time for a year, save up money. My dreams aren't going anywhere." But Elena heard the crack in her daughter's voice, saw the way Maya's shoulders sagged. This was the same girl who studied until midnight all through high school. Who volunteered at the hospital every weekend. Who wrote essays about wanting to help people the way nurses helped her mom when her dad was dying. Elena pulled the crumpled business card from her apron pocket, where it had stayed all night like a small weight against her hip. James Harrison. The man who could probably pay for Maya's entire education with one lunch. The irony burned. Here was someone with the power to change lives, who sat in her diner for an hour and couldn't even leave a few dollars. But as Elena held the card, something nagged at her memory. Harrison Enterprises. She'd heard that name recently, and not just in the newspapers. Her neighbor Mrs. Chin had mentioned it last week. "They're hiring local people," she'd said. "And the owner himself comes to town to meet workers personally. Imagine that, a billionaire who actually cares about regular people." Elena felt a strange pull. What if there was more to the story? Against every instinct telling her to stay in her lane, the next afternoon Elena found herself standing outside the gleaming Harrison Enterprises building, her warm purse clutched tightly in nervous hands. The lobby was all marble and glass. The receptionist looked like she belonged in a magazine. Elena's diner uniform felt shabby and out of place. But Maya's disappointed face kept pushing her forward. She wasn't asking for charity. Just a chance for her daughter to interview for any job that could help pay for college. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said with a polite but firm smile. "Mr. Harrison isn't taking unscheduled appointments." Elena was about to turn away, defeated, when a familiar voice spoke from behind her. "Actually, I think I have time for this particular visitor." Elena turned to see James Harrison himself, looking just as he had in the diner, but somehow completely different. Gone was the distant, distracted look. Now his eyes held recognition, and what looked almost like relief. "You're Elena Martinez from Murphy's Diner," he said. And it wasn't a question. I'm sorry to bother you," Elena stammered, suddenly feeling foolish. I just wanted to talk about my daughter, maybe finding her work. Please, James interrupted gently, gesturing toward the elevators. Let's talk in my office. There's something I need to explain about that night at the diner. As they rode the elevator to the 20th floor, Elena's mind raced with confusion and curiosity. How did he know her name? Why did he seem to be expecting her? The doors opened to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the town where Elena had spent her entire life. But what caught her eye wasn't the view. It was the wall of photographs, construction sites, ribbon cuttings, workers in hard hats. Every image told a story of community and local jobs. 3 months ago, James began quietly, sitting across from Elena instead of behind his big desk. My mother passed away. She spent her last weeks in the hospital here. And during that time, I watched the nurses, their compassion, their dedication. It reminded me why I went into business in the first place. Not for profit, but to create opportunities for people like them. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. I spent weeks researching nursing programs and scholarships. He continued, opening the folder. But I wanted to understand the community better. To see how real families were managing. So I started visiting local businesses, listening, watching. That night at Murphy's Diner wasn't random. I'd heard about a waitress who worked there for 15 years, putting her daughter through school, never missing a shift despite everything she'd been through. Elena's hands trembled as James placed a certificate on the table between them. The Harrison Foundation Full Nursing Scholarship. Covering tuition, books, and living expenses for 4 years. Beneath it was another document, a job offer for Elena herself as community liaison for the new medical center, helping local families access healthcare and opportunities. The business card wasn't an accident, James explained softly. I couldn't approach you directly that night because I needed to see how you treated people when you thought no one important was watching. And Elena, what I saw was extraordinary. You treated every person with dignity. The elderly man counting quarters for coffee. The teenage couple sharing one dessert. The exhausted truck driver. You saw people, not profit margins. Tears streamed down Elena's face as everything clicked into place. I didn't leave a tip, James said with a small smile. Because what I wanted to give you was so much more than money. He placed one final document in front of her. A contract establishing a permanent scholarship fund, in her name. The Elena Martinez Nursing Scholarship. For working mothers pursuing healthcare careers. Your dignity, your service, your love for your daughter, that's the foundation of real change in a community. There's just one condition, James added with a warm smile. You have to keep working at Murphy's Diner 2 days a week. That's where you belong. Where you make the biggest difference. Those customers need someone who sees them, the way you do. 3 months later, Maya started nursing school with tears of joy in her eyes. Elena began her new role helping other families chase their dreams. And Murphy's Diner still serves the best coffee in town. Elena still treats every customer like family, because she learned that dignity shared is dignity multiplied. And sometimes, the most powerful acts of kindness happen when we least expect them, and from the people we thought had forgotten us. If this story touched your heart, drop a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of unexpected kindness that remind us humanity is still alive.